welcome to the Sales Hangover podcast. This is a podcast with 5 sales professionals where we're going to talk sales, everything from cold calling to closing. Since today is our first episode, we can go around and introduce ourselves because we all have different, we're all in different fields of sales kind of. So my name is Abby. I am a recent college graduate from NDSU. I did get a certificate in sales while I was in school. And I am pursuing a career in fire truck sales right now. So I'm living out in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, selling fire trucks to all sorts of cities and counties across the country. I'll hand it off to Eric. He can introduce himself next.
All right. That's a really fun product to sell, by the way. My name is Eric Chertovig. I teach at North Dakota State University. Abby was, as she said, a former student of mine. I did spend about 20 years in the tech industry prior to getting into education. And I'm sure I'll tell lots of stories over the course of this podcast from those 20 years. So, Grant, you want to go next?
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Hey, everybody. I'm Grant Malstead. I'm in tech sales. I work at Microsoft. I've been there for 8 years, and I also graduated from NDSU. So go Bison. Neil?
Hey, yeah, thanks, Grant. Neil Kelchin from Fargo, North Dakota. Been here for 15 years. In sales for 15 years and been selling some stuff from cell phones to SaaS to copiers and printers, office technology. Just have a real passion for sales and helping people in sales. And that's why I was pumped to get part of this group. Bring it over to Anna.
Hey, I'm Anna Hansen, and I'm the sales director at Bytespeed. We're a technology solutions company, so I spend my world wrapped up in geeky solutions. You guys all have a kind of a common theme here, but nobody's as cool as the fire trucks. But
technology and fire trucks.
I love it. Abby, you make us so much cooler.
Yes.
So I've got about 20 years of sales experience and sales leadership. So I'm really excited to have these conversations.
Awesome. Well, today, for our very first episode, we are going to talk about cold calling, kind of bring it back to the beginning, right? I think every new salesman's biggest fear. In order to kind of just get us started, let's go around the group and just, give a cold calling tip. What do you think when you're going to pick up the phone and call a customer? Personally, I can go first. I try and just be confident and pretend that I know them. I'm relatively new to sales, being a new grad, but when I pick up the phone, I'm just like, you're calling your uncle, you're calling your uncle, you're calling your uncle, just because it calms my nerves. Because if you pick up the phone and they call them and you sound nervous, I feel like that doesn't ever really work out in your favor.
I love that, Abby, because I think the biggest mistake that people make when they're cold calling is like we go into sales mode and we turn into a robot. Like all of the things that make us good at sales, our authenticity, the way we connect with people. Like as soon as we get into that sales pitch on a cold call or even in person on a cold call, we go into the robot mode and we kind of give up that realness, that authenticity that makes people really want to relate and be approachable with us. So
First rule of being a salesperson is you don't act like a salesperson, right? And I said this, or I shared this with one of you earlier, but I was out for a walk today and was visiting with somebody that had this big, mean-looking dog with him, and I just kind of held my hand out just a little bit. The dog came up and stiffed my hand, and within 30 seconds, I was petting the dog, and great. I kind of think that's like cold outreach, right? Like you want to reach out, but you kind of have to have the customer come to you just a little bit too. You can't come in and be too pushy. You can't just really come at it because it just turns people away. I think we've all seen that on LinkedIn, right? Somebody sends you a connection. You accept it, and like literally a minute later, you have a product pitch in Messenger, like wanting to set up a meeting, and you're like, whoa, not what I signed up for. Calling, of course, is more, of a direct outreach, but I still think it applies there. You have to kind of find a way not to come off too salesy.
I think sales development, whether it's cold calling, cold email, LinkedIn messaging, it's something that like all salespeople are going to do at some point. And you maybe do it early in career. Like that was my first role at Microsoft, was cold calling 80 to 100 people a day that had signed up for product trials. And so the great thing about that was like, it threw me in the fire of, hey, I started to learn the technology lingo. I started to be able to just quickly overcome obviously like rejection because people don't answer. They say, hey, you get hung up on all these different things, right? So it builds some of that like grit, some of that tenacity. Mm-hmm. But then again, I think it's like my little thing of like in reflection, it's always, man, it's such a great learning opportunity because more than likely it's going to be something you're going to do a lot, right? I mean,
Yep.
it's all, sales is a numbers game, right? You have your funnel, you start obviously large, it's going to get smaller, smaller, smaller. When you're in those scenarios, I love what everybody's talked about. Yeah, be personable. Just remember, you're talking to a person on the other, side of the phone. It's not just a prospect. It's not a client. It's like, it's a real person. So just be a person, ask questions, be vulnerable. Hey, if you don't know the answer, not a big deal. That's a great question. I'm going to go find an answer for you. So kind of a ramble there, but something that I'm
That's great.
passionate about just because I've had a lot of experience with it. And I think it's something that's helped kind of propel me, honestly, in the sales career.
100%.
Neil?
Well, you all took my tips, so now I got to going last. That's tough, but I'm going to echo a little bit what Grant said, because that's what made him a great salesperson. When I have new people come in, and if you're new starting at it, you think of cold outreach when you first start, you will think of any reason why you're not going to make that first call, right? You're going to be like, you know what? I'm going to train up some more. Yep, I'm going to get some more information, because there's no information online on cold calling. You can't find anything about what you should do or what you not should do. I mean, it can go any end of the spectrum. There's just information overload. And that's what everybody wants to do, is train more, get more information before they make that call. Then they'll be ready. I'm all about practice, but there's nothing like putting the reps in. It's nothing like getting under the bar and actually doing the work. And the problem is, it takes people years to get to 20 hours of cold calling. Just do it your first week.
Yep.
Get into the fire and do it your first week. And guess what? After that, what's going to happen? You're going to be pretty good at cold calling. You're going to be pretty awesome at it at that point. And so I just tell people, is jump in, show them that the process is important. We're just going to go for 100 no's. Like when you get a no, we're going to celebrate. We're going to because then we're not scared about being rejected. So it's like, we're trying to get a no. Yeah, let's get to 100 today. How many no's can we get to? Right. And so then we're just teaching that the process is important. And then we don't have to worry so much about, because that's when we tighten up, when we're like, I got to make a sale. I got to do this. I'm going to impress my boss. I'm going to be awesome. I'm going to be great. And it's like, you tighten up and you turn into that pushy salesperson nobody wants to talk to. So just go. Just get as many in as possible.
I want to add one thing, and sorry, Eric. Here's the best thing, too, that would happen. You'd get so worked up, so psyched up. I got to do my research. I got to know who I'm talking to. And you finally hit, send, and it's ringing, and your heart's beating, and it's ringing, and it's ringing, and it's ringing. And then you know what happens?
Voicemail.
The voicemail. And then you're not even talking to anybody anyways.
Right? That's such a good point, because like I said, you don't really get it, that you're not going to probably talk to that person that first touch. And that's when and then people usually do one more touch and then they're done. They don't understand it takes about 8 to 12, right? Before you're actually maybe even going to talk to somebody to become relevant at that point. So yeah, no, that's a really good point too. It's like, it's a letdown, right? You do all your research, you're ready, you're trained, and then nothing.
I talked to a former student today, actually, and he graduated in May and took a job, and it's primarily business development. And he was talking about how the first few weeks were really rough, and making calls, and he just wasn't getting through. And then he was like, "But I've set up 9 meetings so far this week." And if you've set up 9 meetings, that's pretty damn good.
I'm sure you guys see this too, but I feel like the first part of the role when you get into sales is just like proving that you can do the work. Make the calls. It doesn't matter if they're good. It doesn't matter if they're bad. Just prove to yourself that you can do it. And then once you accomplish, okay, I can make the calls. I sounded horrible on all of them, but I can make them. I know I can do this. Then you start thinking about, okay, what can I do to sound good? I know I can actually do the workout. Now I'm going to actually start working on my technique. And that's where you start moving into the, hey, when I call, I'm going to call with a reason, and I'm going to call with purpose. I'm going to try to add value right away into that conversation when I'm meeting with somebody new. But the initial part that everybody's so afraid of, that analysis paralysis that you guys were discussing, is it just stops us dead in the tracks. It's like, just do it. You want to know something? Call them and ask. Don't look online. Don't. Half that's wrong anyway.
Right. Well, and I think too, in my personal experience, I've learned so much more from doing it. You can only learn so much from, training manuals and whatever, but when you pick up the phone and call and they ask you a question, you say, I have no idea what you just said, but I'll find the answer. You're going to find the answer way quicker and remember it way better than if you were to try and train yourself on the product or technology or whatever you're selling. Moving into another part of cold calling, active listening is a crucial part of sales in every stage. but especially in cold calling. So if you guys could go around and kind of give, your 2 cents on why you need to be an active listener in a cold call and not just give your pitch.
I'll start. See, I like starting first, Neil, because then by the time that it gets to me, I got to go first, and I'm stealing your good ideas. But I think active listening is so crazy, and I think one of the things that we run into as salespeople is we call in with our own agenda, right? I want you to do X, Y, Z. I want you to start here. And part of active listening is actually hearing the potential customer say, I have a good solution here. If it's not broken, you don't want to fix it. That is not, there are so many different potential customers, potential things you can sell. So if you work for an organization that has multiple lines, listen to them when they say we're good and say, I'm glad you have a good solution in there. If you ever are frustrated with that solution, I have this and I'd love to be a resource to you, but if you're one of the lucky ones and it's not broken, I'm not going to try to fix it. And if that's the end of the conversation, go start having a conversation with somebody that does need your solution, or pivot to another solution where you might be able to be a resource with that customer, depending on what your business looks like. But I hear people sit there, they approach the customer and the customer says, I don't need that. And they keep talking about their own agenda. And I feel like you didn't hear anything they said. Nobody wants to be treated that way. I think that's where a lot of sales reps get that bad rap because they aren't listening.
I mean, I feel like it's, you have one mouth and 2 ears for a reason. And that's
Yeah.
kind of a silly analogy, but I mean, it's all about understanding who you're working with. Like you said, what their needs are. What problems do they have that they know about? What problems maybe do they have that they don't know about? And you can uncover a lot of that by being really good at asking questions, right? I think it's one thing to be an active listener, but obviously you got to be really good at asking questions that gives you the opportunity to listen and then respond, right? Based on what you hear. And then obviously then, it can go many, many different directions. But I think, again, as I was starting off in career, our team, we'd put together pages full of great open-ended questions you could ask. Great, just things to try to get conversations going and get the other person talking. People love talking about themselves. Hey, what do you have going on? What problems are you having? What's going well? All these different things. Sometimes you'll be like, wow, okay, please take a breath. I'd like to say something, but if people are talking, that's a good thing. That's a really good sign, right?
Mm-hmm.
Neil, I don't want to make you go last this time, so you have to go.
I appreciate that. But let me tell you why I suck at listening. As soon as Anna started talking, I'm thinking about what should I say? The rule number one of what you should not be doing in active listening, right? But I struggle with it because I have always in sales. And now I just literally have to tell myself, politely to shut up in my head, right? And listen and really listen to what's going on. And the biggest thing that's helped me is I'm genuinely curious of the other person, of just human nature, of just how this person's interacting and what they're doing, and trying to interrupt the pattern a little bit by asking a great question, to Grant's thing, right? That's the biggest thing I'm working on is what can I say that just interrupts the pattern that makes them say, no one's asked me that before. We're really happy with the people we have. And that's awesome. I stay in agreement. I want customers just like you. What do you love about them? And they're kind of like, oh, what? Okay, that's weird, right? Then tell me what's great about the customers you have. And then they just start, the vendor you have, then they start talking a little bit more. And that's all we want is them to do the talking. And that's probably the biggest thing we find. If you guys listen to sales tapes or even in a discovery, if we get even to a meeting, if you're doing 80% of the talking, that's not going to go very well. And I would say a majority of first-time sales reps, that's exactly what it is they're doing 80% of the talking when that needs to be flipped the other way around.
Yeah, sales is a lot more about listening than talking. That's a major misperception that people have about it. And by the way, Neil, you did steal one of the things I was going to say right there, because I have that same problem. Sometimes people start talking and I'm like, ooh, I want to jump in.
I want to say.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's going to happen over the course of this podcast, by the way. I apologize in advance. What's interesting about making a cold call is the purpose of the call. When we pick up the phone and make the call, it's all about us, the salesperson, right? I'm calling because I want to sell something. It's about me. But the second somebody picks up that phone, you have to flip that switch. You have to make it about them. Because sales, doesn't work very well if the salesperson is always about, what's in it for me and looking at it from their perspective. They have to they have to make it about the customer. And, that goes back to some of the things, Neil, Grant, Anna, that you guys said, asking good questions, curiosity. I think, curiosity is like a superpower, right? I think that is a really important tool. But asking questions is how we build relationships. Sometimes with students, I'll talk about like going on a first date with somebody. Abby's heard me say this, I'm sure. If you went on a first date with somebody and they didn't ask you a question the entire time, you get to the end of the date and you'd be like, wow, they're not interested. That was really a horrible experience. You go on a first date and if the person asks you a ton of questions, it shows that they're interested in learning about you. Like, it's literally how we build relationships in all aspects of life. So you still, even in a cold call where we feel like this pressure that we only have this tiny little bit of time, in my opinion, it's still a really good strategy to ask a question or two and pull out some, information.
I gotta say, I think that if you are brand new into sales and you have the problem that Neil and Eric just said, and I will tell you confidently that I have too, part of the thing is because we're so excited about what we're doing and excited about what we know we have that we just can't wait to tell the people that we're about it. And I pray that all of you listening to this have that same problem someday, because it's the best problem that you could ever have. One of the things I'll say that actually helps me is like I have built in a practice where I'm like, I listen to what they say and then I validate. So that's part of my process in active listening, is validating what somebody tells me. Oh, you use this. This is what I know about that, or I've heard good things about that, or, I validate what they say. But the other part of that is that active listening isn't just the whole thing. Like, you do that and then you got to provide value. How do you provide value in there? I spent the first year or two of my career, I know, being super nice and providing zero value. I was really nice to everybody. I want to talk to them about whatever I could, but I provided zero value. I was like, hi, how's the weather? Do you have anything I can help with? They'd say no. And I'd say, thank you. And I didn't make any offers. And so that active listening part doesn't preclude you from saying, this is what we do here. If something changes down the road, let me know. Make an offer every time. You do this here, validate, learn more if you can about why they're doing it, what they like, any questions in that space. But at the end of that, your job is to make sure they understand what you do in that space. And so active listening does not preclude you from the follow-up. And it does help me. I get super excited. Neil, Eric, you and I have that in common. I'm like, oh, I can't wait to go and tell you why I love the thing.
I have to jump in off of something you said, Anna. You mentioned talking about the weather, right? And of course, upper Midwest weather talk is like the most common thing you could possibly talk about. Mm-hmm. The problem with weather talk or making the call, this wouldn't be about a cold call, but calling the customer, I'm just calling to check in, right? It is like this overused terminology that way too many people utilize, right? You have to sound different. You have to be authentic. You have to be a little bit unique. Don't be afraid to bring some of those characteristics into it, because that's when it doesn't sound like a sales call. If you do the same thing that 90% of people are doing, you're going to get those same results. And finding your unique and authentic voice in there, I think is super important.
I would challenge people, never call to check in. Don't call to check in. If you're calling to check in, people call me on sales calls. I don't have time for somebody I don't know or barely know to call and check in.
Yeah. It's a total BS statement.
Yeah. Call for a reason every time. Know what your reason is when you're calling. I have this. You should know this. This is coming up. Call with a reason. And they might not want your reason or care about your reason. That's fine. But call with a purpose every single time.
Or call to add value, right? Like, call because you have something important to share with them, right? Whatever that might be. That gives you a reason to call that's valuable. But yeah, I'm calling to check in phrase is like nails on a chalkboard.
First 2 years of my sales career. That sums it up. Calling to check in. Do you have anything that I could help with? I'm not going to do any work.
Oh. How about this weather this week, right?
I have snow too.
Hey, it's Fargo, North Dakota in late September, and it is beautiful and 85 degrees outside, so we could talk about weather.
Good. but I've seen that when I'm looking at some emails, right? And it's just like circling back or like, it's just like, ugh, right? And it's like new information has come to light. That's why I'm reaching out to you guys, right? That's what we want to hear. Like, I know this was a sticking point. Well, we changed it mostly because of you and what you gave me for feedback, or we're doing this now. And that's when it's, again, they're like, oh, that's adding some value to you at that point, right? But on your point, Anna, what you said is belief. That's my second tip, because I got it right here. And I'm just, the Ted Lasso fan in me. But that is the single most important thing. I have products that I didn't believe in, and then I have products that I 100% believe in. And you don't have to work on, well, make sure you talk slow here and your tonality changes here. When you believe in the product, that's all sales is. It's a transfer of belief, right? It's a transfer of belief in doing it in that way. And if you believe in it and that product is going to help people, it is so much easier to sell, right? And if your product doesn't have that, well, then you need to work with the product team and find out why you don't believe in it and fix that. Otherwise, and if it doesn't get fixed, you need to go find another product. You need to go find something different, because it just doesn't work. And that's when sales reps get a bad name, is when you're pushing something you don't believe in and then it doesn't deliver the way it does. And then you don't want to be in sales. Mm-hmm. So just, again, I had to go Ted Lasso. And, yeah,
Neil, I think we should have a point system between movie and TV references throughout this podcast. It's right now 1-to-1. So.
Okay. I'll beat you.
Abby, you better keep us on track. Take us to our next step in this topic.
I was trying to soak up all your knowledge, but you guys are kept going. So the next thing that I have written down about cold calling is, it's so scary for these new sales reps, and often they get handed this task. So how do you let fear not win? How do you guys are talking about how you try and you do all the research and you try and learn the product 100%, but how do you let fear not win and make the call?
I'm going to jump into this in a broader sense than cold calling. Fear is largely one of the most misused emotions we possibly have that limits us in our life. We've all, whether it's in college or whether it's in a work meeting or on a Microsoft Teams call, whatever it might be, we have all sat and had a question we didn't want to ask because we didn't want to, we don't want to look dumb, right? We have all limited ourselves at tons of points in our life for that exact reason, like, the fear of raising my hand and asking a question. A cold call is something we just have to get through. And it's the first cold call where you're like, oh my God, I'm going to stumble over this. And it probably goes horrible. It's okay, right? The second one goes better. By the time you're 2 or 3 days in of making those, Grant talked about making, 100 calls a day, Grant? I bet you by the time he got to week 2, he was pretty damn good at it, whether he realized it or not. So you just have to push through that initial thing and realize it gets easier from there. And
I would just build off that, Eric. I love the thought of it's bigger than just picking up the phone and dialing somebody. I talk a lot about things that are hard for a reason. Because if they were easy, everybody would do it. And whether it's, picking up the phone and calling, you get nervous, or, you want to talk about physical fitness. Is it easy to just go run a marathon? No, you got to do the base work, the prep work, right? And getting that getting that hit of dopamine of, hey, I did something, I accomplished something, I did something that was hard. To your point, the next time it's not quite as hard. You have a little bit more confidence. You've got some experience under your belt. And that's why, again, it's just a numbers thing. You just have to do it, and do it, and do it.
And to steal Neil's believe strategy, if you really believe that your product is the answer to their problem and going to help them improve their business or whatever the positive outcome is, then it feels good to call. If you're a real believer in what you sell, you want to make that call because you want to help people, right? You're like sales is a business of service. Sales is an act of service. You're selling something to somebody to help them. And if you believe that, I think that also helps you get through that.
Yeah, kind of going off that quick, Eric, bringing back our dating analogy, if you believe, if you have a crush on someone and you believe that you're meant to be together, you'll find a way to talk to them, right? You happen to run into
That's a way tougher call to make, though. I'm glad I've been married for 22 years and don't have to.
Right, but you believe that you're meant to be. It's not as difficult to go up and talk to them. I think the same thing
Yeah.
applies to cold calling.
I think that belief conversation is really interesting because one thing, if you choose a career in sales, you believe that you have the ability to sell. Like, you know, in your core, in your gut, that there's something you can do. And that's really important part of overcoming the fear. And you got a job in sales. That means that someone else believed you could do it too. So congratulations. There's at least two people, you and your hiring manager or boss, that thinks you can do this. And I think the worst part is the first part. That's it. The first workout's the hardest. The first calls are the hardest. And it's because you don't have any perspective, right? This could go really bad. And what you realize after you get the reps in is that the bad's not that bad. It just hurts less over time. And you do overcome that. But I think the biggest advice, and you've heard this multiple times on this conversation already, is just jump. Just jump in. Just jump in. Don't think about it. Don't put too much in. You aren't going to sound great at first. In fact, sometimes I'm 20 years into this, I still don't sound great. And that's okay. And I think one of the best parts about this part in my career, and I'm sure you guys can relate to some extent, and Abby, you will get there sooner than probably most because you're fabulous. After time goes by, you're not afraid of sounding like an idiot because you're like, oh, been there, done that. You're not afraid of embarrassing yourself because you've done that. And you know what? My worst calls a lot of times turned into my best calls because maybe because people felt sorry for me. I don't know, but I was real. I was authentic. I was myself. I tripped over my tongue, and they were like, "Well, she's not a pro," but she's a real person. And so I think if the worst thing that can happen is that you embarrass yourself on a phone call, first of all, if it's a cold call, they don't even know who you are. And if they do know who you are, they just found out that you care a lot about what you're doing because you care enough to be nervous. That matters to me.
And we are way more self-critical on ourselves, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like, we think it went horrible. The person we probably called probably didn't think it went that bad. Like we are way more critical. Trust me. Going back to kind of your example in it, Anna. Sometimes I walk out of the classroom and I'm like, man, I nailed that lecture. That was great. Sometimes I walk out and I'm like, I missed. That was flat. Like, I need to do better. Experience is a great thing, but you just have to push through those lows. I mean, that's kind of the name of our podcast. We haven't even talked about that yet. Sales Hangover. People are still probably wondering 29 minutes into the conversation where that comes from, right? Which we could talk about. But sales is ups and downs. Sales is having that awesome month where you kill it. The analogy is going out on a Friday night and having a really fun time, apparently. And the next month, things fall apart. Saturday morning, you didn't feel quite so good. Sales is these ups and downs. And early in your sales career, the ups and downs are bigger, right? Because you're still figuring it out. And so you have a phenomenal month and you just love it. And then the next month falls apart and you feel horrible about it, right? The farther in you go, you probably have learned some lessons and you have some more consistency. But those first few years in sales, I think really link into that topic of, sales hangover in how we can help, raise the floor on the bad months, through skill development and learning, from other people's experiences, hopefully.
I think when you nail the sales hangover, right, the highs and lows. And again, when you first start in sales, to your point, Anna, you're super excited because someone hired you, right? Someone believed in you, someone hired you. And maybe the hiring manager might have said, like, it's a little easier than what it is. Maybe they talked about how much money you can make in sales. So you're just at this point, like, I'm going to rock this. I'm going to kill this. And you start off your first week calling and you don't set one appointment. Okay, so now you're in the downslide, right? And so what do you start thinking about? You start getting this limiting beliefs like cold calling's dead. No one wants to talk to me. I can't talk to the decision maker. And you can keep filling your head with all these things, right? And then people say, I'm done. I'm not going to do sales anymore. And that's where they sometimes quit because they never got to feel that experience that we all got to go through, right? Like we all stuck it out and kept going. And then we got new results that totally changed the belief because that's what's going to happen. You got to have a new result to change the belief. But if you don't stick in long enough, you won't get it. And you won't talk to any salesperson that's done it for 15, 20 years that says, oh, you should get out of it because it's the best career you could ever have.
Absolutely.
The people that did quit early because they couldn't do it consistently.
Yeah.
And I try to change the narrative. Sometimes I try to pattern up, and it's hard. I go, it's not hard. Auschwitz is hard. Cancer is hard. We're calling people. Come on. Let's not that hard. Let's just do this thing. Let's just get after this, right? Just to switch the pattern a little bit so they're not overthinking it a little bit. Like this, we're always like rise and grind. This is tough. Sales, consistency. It's like, no, it's not. We're just talking to people today. Let's not make it so hard. Let's just do the thing and do it consistently. Then we'll get some new experiences that'll give us a new belief. You said it in the beginning, such a roller coaster. And I just say, just stick with it. Just trust me. But it's so hard when you're in it, guys, right? When you're like actually in it and you haven't made that sale yet. Like I remember just being like, man, I just suck at this. I'm just not good at sales. I should probably just stop. Someone told me I was good at sales, but they lied. They're liars.
So Grant, I want to kind of put you on the spot based off of what Neil was saying. Your first role you described as, at Microsoft was making 80 to 100 calls a day, I think you said. You know, how many times in those first few months did you doubt whether you made the right decision or not?
I think that I had a bigger picture in mind.
Okay, that's good.
Like, hey, this was my way in at the ground level to a big corporation, right? And I bought into, I drank the Kool-Aid. I loved the product. I knew what we could provide value to customers, and I always I knew that the ecosystem and like the landscape and even just like the acumen of coworkers and what I think I should know is just endless. Like you're never going to know everything, right? And I told myself like, you know what? I'm going to be the best like appointment setter, because that's really what I was as a sales development rep. I was setting meetings for other folks that would come in, and then have the deeper conversations. I was like, I'm going to be the best damn appointment setter out of everyone here. If I can, out of that 100 calls a day, if I can book 5 meetings, that's phenomenal, right? And so like what I did is I took some of that pressure off of like, even, you call customers and, you're asking questions and they start to get over your head pretty quick. Like, hey, you know what? What am I here to do? Like I was here to set the next meeting. And as long as I can get that yes, like my job is complete. This is a win. Now I go do it again, right? So I think the big thing for me was just like, let's ratchet this up a couple levels. Let's look at the big picture here. Like, this is my way in to start. I'm going to do the best job I can, and I'm going to be the best at whatever this job is. And then I'm going to always learn.
You could easily have looked at the 95 or 96 that went horrible and didn't go anywhere as a failure, but it wasn't, right? The 3 or 4 calls are, it went varied by day, I'm sure, but the super small number of calls, that was the outcome you wanted. That was the success. The rest of it didn't matter. But I think people get really hung up on, oh my gosh, I only made 2 meetings today out of 100 phone calls. 2 meetings. Like that might be great.
What I love about what you said, Grant, is like your belief. And your belief wasn't necessarily like, I love setting appointments. It was your belief in yourself and like your own pathway. Like, I'm here for a reason and I'm going to get there. And I think all of us need to have that, right? When you're starting, like, I'm going somewhere. When I start here, I'm going somewhere. And I think that belief, we talked about it earlier, and that is really what you need to do, is know why you're there. Abby, I'm super curious. You're like the audience that we're talking to. You're super early into your career. Are you listening to us going, or are you like, oh, I feel that stuff? Or what's your experience been like? Give everybody a little background. You have the coolest background, I feel like, because you're really like just getting started at that really cool, fun part of your career.
Yeah, I'm definitely feeling all. Yeah, the scary part. I'm definitely feeling all the feelings you guys are talking about with new sales reps, and I had kind of a unique background, having a little bit of an education in sales. At NDSU, I took multiple of Eric's classes. I was on our podcast and our sales team there, so I did. I'm not gonna lie, I came out with a big head. Like I was like, I know sales. Like I'm gonna have a leg up on everyone. I know what discovery is, what follow up should look like. I'm set. And then the biggest lesson that I learned is to not take everything so personally. whether it's from a customer, whether it's from your manager, just because they send you an email and there isn't an exclamation point doesn't mean they're mad at you. They're not mad at you. Um, they just are telling you something, right? So not everyone's out to get you. And just because you're not killing it in the first 3 months at your job doesn't mean that you're a bad sales rep, doesn't mean you're bad at business. I mean, there were moments where I was like, I'm going to have to just start a self-sustaining farm and just live off of that because there's no way I'm going to survive in the corporate world. This is way too hard. So once you take a step back and you just realize that it's
that kind of links into our maybe one of our last topics, and that is just sales being a numbers game, right? And sales is human to human, but especially around cold calling, it is a numbers game. You have to make the dials, and going back to what you said, Abby, like the first handful of months in any sales job it takes a while to find your groove. It takes a while to start the wheels turning a little bit, right? Because when you're 6 months in, some of the conversations you're having actually come from some of those early calls you made in month 1 and month 2. So it really does take a while to get the wheels turning, and I think that even relates back to the conversation I was having earlier today with a different student of mine. Why he was making so many appointments now versus the first month when he was on the job is it's kind of like a machine, right? You have to get all the gears turning, and then it starts producing.
I think something like I like to think about, or I like to remind myself, is it's easy for us to perceive like overnight success because you see the people that go viral on social media. You see the people that hit President's Club at an organization. You see the people that are like what seems to be at the top of the mountain. And it's easy to think that, oh, that just happened overnight. Or, oh, they got a lucky break, right? And what you don't realize is the amount of repetitions, the amount of time it takes to do these things. Like when I talk with younger salespeople, it's always funny. People always bring up, the cold calling and, oh, I don't want to do sales development. Like I already know how to do that. Like I like to say, man, you got to do that for at least like 2 years minimum. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, and I always say, that almost kind of offends me. I've been doing this for 8 years and I put in my time, right? And now I've got the experience and I know how to do this and I'm confident with the customers and we do the whole thing. And I'm like, so you're telling me you think that you're at the same level as me and I've been doing this for this long? And no disrespect, but just to kind of push back a little bit, you got to put in the time. You got to put in the reps. If you want to do well, you got to lay that foundation. And I think that's where it all starts.
I think it's so funny what you said. And it's so true that and Abby touched on it. I definitely started, you come in with an ego, right? If you get a sales job or if you're in it, mostly you can do something other people can't. That's why they picked you. You probably had a lot of competition. Not very many people can do what we do. So guess what that comes with? Tremendous ego. Well won, well-deserved ego. But even Grant, you said from the beginning that you were like, I am on a mission. I'm going to do this. Nothing's going to stop me. That's ego. You knew I'm going to do this and I'm going to be successful and you committed to it. Abby, you walked in on Cloud9. I did too. And I spent a lot of time in my early part looking around going, how come those guys are so good at this? And I'm not. Why can't I do it? I should be good. I really thought a lot of myself, but I will tell you, nothing's more humbling than a career in sales. And it is humbling. And you think you got the job, so you're good. Just in general, right off the chute, I will say, if you got the job, you're probably pretty damn good. You've got good communication skills. You've got something that people saw in you that's special. And be prepared to be humbled, but you got to keep going. And that resilience, that part where I'm going to be the best I'm going to be, I'm going to keep fighting. I'm going to deal with the rejection and I'm going to keep going in spite of the humbling moments, which are harder on us egomaniacs, right? They hurt a little bit, but it's also part of the path that just really does turn you into an all-star.
So we've covered some, quite a bit of thoughts around cold calling, being authentic, putting in the numbers and the hours and dealing with the fear. Let's talk a little bit about LinkedIn, because that's another tool that's used for a lot of business development and outreach. And in all honesty, I see a lot of it being done what I consider to be quite poorly. I'm wondering what you guys' thoughts are on that.
Well, I think Neil's a superstar, so I think you should take this because when it comes to LinkedIn, I look at your post, I'm like, oh, you're my inspiration, man, or one of them on there. So are you, Eric?
I think what you said, Eric, like in the beginning, like, be like, go up to the dog. There's nothing worse when someone just hits you right at the beginning, wants to make a connection, and then instantly goes to pitch mode, right? Nothing turns you off more is when you go straight into pitch mode into this. And that's why I think this LinkedIn is this community where you can give value, right? And like I tell my guys, it's like, put stuff out there, document. It's the old Gary Vee thing, right? Just document what you're doing. Just let people have a glimpse of what you're doing on a daily basis. You don't have to think of this amazing post. And that's my biggest problem was the start again, paralysis by analysis. And I still do it. I like sit there and I have to do it like after my morning run because that's when my runner's high is in there. And I'm so like, I'll just do stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, I just sent that. Like I actually put that on LinkedIn. Like I wasn't like, you had like, because you guys all do it. You like get in this mode. You're like, yeah, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And then you get into work and like, that's a dumb idea. I'm not going to do that stuff.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, I feel the same way. There's lots of, I mean, I'm pretty active, as you guys know, posting stuff on LinkedIn, and most of it, I kind of just cringe just a little bit when I hit post. Like, I'm not sure I want to do this. I kind of have to push myself to do it. And going back to that cold outreach on LinkedIn, when people do that, like they're not making it about them, or they are making it about them. They're not making it about me. If that same person connected with me, and then over the next 2 months, and I realize this is a slow play, right? And we want to, we want fast results. But if over the next few months they liked a few things I posted, maybe dropped a comment or two in there, I'd see that.
Yeah.
I'd probably like their comment or respond to their comment. Now all of a sudden, 2 months down the road, if they sent me a message and said, "Hey, I've really enjoyed your content over the last 2 months. I'd love to jump on a quick Teams call with you and learn a little bit more about you and tell you what I do." Sure, I probably would say yes.
That instant gratification again, right? It's what you said before, right, Grant? The people come in and they want instantly to have that gratification. So it's once in a while I was talking to some people, like, yeah, we're doing LinkedIn and we did like 1,000 outreach and we got one person to get an appointment. I'm like, wow, great job. You pissed off 999 people, right? Like 999 people hate you, but you got one. So like, congratulations, right? And then like again, like some of the investment brokers have went to a class on how to reach people on LinkedIn because they all had the same playbook. And then they ran the playbook and I got hit 10 times with the same thing, like the same body message, right? Like they were trying to be a little bit more like smoother in it, but it was like the same thing. It's like, no, this is the same thing as, again, be authentic, be you. Maybe you learn something, but make it generally yours. Like I've never pitched on LinkedIn, but I've gotten sales from LinkedIn. Because people have just said, hey, you're that crazy printer guy, right? Like we should maybe get printers from you, right? And I'm like, yeah, sure, that'd be fun. Like that, and that's what we're trying to do, right? That's what we're trying to create is just like, again, just off the wall and genuine and different. And that's what you have to be. That's your personal brand. And that's why it's so important. Yeah. But we're always overthinking that we have to sell. No, it's just, again, value, and that's entertaining. Right? Like it's got to be somewhat a little bit entertaining and valuable because then people are like, oh, that's good. So,
Grant, you do a ton of stuff on LinkedIn. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, I think we live in a world where information is just readily available so quickly. So people can do their own research, right? So like I always ask people, if you walk into a store, and I use Shields as the example, great customer service, what do they always ask you when you walk in the door? Hey, what can I help you? What are you looking for? What can I help with? What's your typical response? Oh, nothing, just looking around. Well, right. You went there for a reason.
And then I dropped like $300.
Right? You're there for a reason.
Every time.
Here's the point being, is that what LinkedIn allows you to do, like you guys have talked about, is it creates awareness. So it gets people to understand a little bit of like who you are as an individual. Sure, what does your organization do? Like, how can you create some awareness so that if potentially, somebody's like, hey, I need, I don't know, Microsoft software. And they go, geez, I see this guy named Grant online and he's always posting stuff. He's talking about stuff. He's sharing info. He's helping better the community, I just feel like there's a gravitational pull that people buy things from people they know and trust. right? So like, yeah, you're still going to do your outreach and you're still going to do all that type of stuff. But like like you said, there's just so many people that are just doing it so wrong. And like we joked about it when we're sitting here on the podcast, I get an email to my Microsoft technology account. Some guy says, "Hey, do you need a new sheet metal provider?" What? Like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
So just like, yes, it's in today's age, a social media world, where's people's attention on the platforms? Who do people buy from? People they know and trust. It's that simple.
Yeah.
I think it's really cool what you just said there. And one of the challenges when you're new is like trying to figure out who you are on social media. I'm not going to even lie. I'm not going to say how old I am, but I'm pretty old and I don't know. Like it is hard. And I look at Neil and I'm like, I know who Neil is. He's like the funny, cool guy, right? But I'm not the funny, cool person. I can't do what Neil does. I can't, no matter how hard I try. Grant, your stuff is all about like informing people. Like, you're right. There's a ton of information out there, but I know if you post it, like that's probably something I do want to look at because you're like helping me weed through. So you're like that eternal resource, helping me figure out what's the stuff I do need to look at. And Eric, you're the funny, cool guy that's got tons of good information.
Well, I'm not sure I'm funny or cool.
He is. I don't know who I am yet. Abby, are you figuring out who you are on social?
I don't know. I'm trying.
Hey, that's the biggest thing though. Each person's going to have their own style. You're going to have your own way you do things.
Figure out your voice.
Right? Because each person that consumes the content has their own style they like to look at, has their own. So like you're going to find people. I think LinkedIn I think they're at like 1 billion people now on LinkedIn.
Oh God.
You're going to find somebody.
You'll find your niche, and that's the same thing. Sometimes it's not a video. Maybe it's because you can do the written word. I suck. Like, AI is not writing mine because there's typos. I spelt where wrong, and I'm authentic. I'm not going to spell check this thing because I'm just trying to do it off the cuff, right? And that's the only thing we have that's completely authentic. It's you. That's how it just be you. And I appreciate like this talking. You just gave me like courage. Your courage gives me strength because I'm like, I don't like myself on social a lot of times. We're so hard on ourselves, right? Like we always beat ourselves up so much. And that's the hardest thing is just that inner voice sometimes of just like, and us not pushing forward to do things. And so, so it's good to hear that we're all struggling with it, right? Like it's hard for us. Like it's a real thing.
I've written down in the last just like 5 minutes numerous topics for future podcasts. Trust, artificial intelligence. Like there's quite a few things I'm looking forward to. Do we have any more topics on this we want to cover tonight, or we haven't figured out how we're going to end our first podcast, by the way, or how long these are supposed to be. So if you're this far into listening to this podcast, this is what.
You get a gold star.
Yeah, you get a gold star for listening early, and we're figuring it out a little bit ourselves. Anything else we want to use to or say to wrap up our podcast?
I feel like Abby was about to say something really insightful. I saw her start a couple of times.
I have a super good piece of advice for all of our new salesmen. I always think, don't be a scam. Like I don't know how many scams my grandpa has fallen for on, social media or whatever, of like people like reaching out and like, I mean, when you we've all got them. You got a message. It's like, I love your entrepreneurial spirit. Let's talk about this. Send me your phone number. It's like, no, I'm not sending you that. I don't know you. You don't even know me. So I just think when I'm like posting on LinkedIn or if I'm ever cold calling to just don't sound like a scam.
Yeah. You have to be yourself. You have to find your voice. You have to be authentic. And those are the things that build trust. Even in a social media world, we can build trust by through things like authenticity. So I think that's great.
Yeah, love it.
Other than that, that's all I had. So we can wrap up the first sales hangover and.
All right.
That was a great way to end.
This was fun.
Don't be a scam. I love it.
Don't be a scam.
So, we can probably just tell our listeners, our plan is, not super aggressive. We're gonna post a piece of content once a month on an ongoing basis. It's going to be a sales topic. Each of us are going to take turns, kind of coming up with the topic each month. We'll kind of leave it for right now. But we also will have a social media account under Sales Hangover on LinkedIn. Would love for people to follow and engage with us, and possibly, if they have questions or topics or things that they want us to talk about, we would love some feedback and direction from our listeners as well. I don't know, guys. I think that's a wrap, and I've been waiting to click this button just to see what it does. Oh, I don't hear it.
Delete it. Delete it.
Never mind. I had a button in here that said clapping and cheering, so I guess that doesn't do anything. I don't know. Never mind. Fail.
That's awesome.
All right, guys. Have a great night.